So many of you enjoy following my content because of the perspective and the value that I share surrounding BRICS, the economic conglomerate that consists of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and of course, South Africa. And in this video, I'm going to talk about why I chose to live in the best country in Africa and the best part of what the BRICS geopolitical economic conglomerate is and has to offer. Right? So thank you for just finding value in the content that I share and the perspective that I share, because it is just my perspective. I'm an analyst. It's my analysis. It's my perspective. It's my hypothesis. And who knows? I could be wrong, but I think that I've chosen to live in the best country in Africa that is positioned to really shift the global landscape, but also the future of what Africa is and what Africa will be in the next generation. So welcome to the channel. My name is Ashley. I am the founder of Africa Investors Academy, a community of like-minded entrepreneurs and investors who are building businesses and aspiring to build businesses here and invest in projects here on the continent. We're all over the world. We share insight, information, and tools on how to live a global life, but to be position-based and growing here on the continent. So if that sounds interesting, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this content, and share it with someone who would also find value in it. So in this video, I want to share with you the position of South Africa and its position within the BRICS economic system, and why there are many things happening here in the country of South Africa that are causing a shakeup, right? On this channel, I talk a lot about the positives. There's enough media that you can find on the negatives of this country, this continent, and I choose to share with you the positive. I choose to walk and live in the positive because I understand that when I operate in that energy, I attract more positive to me. But I do have an analyst perspective. I do have an economic approach to many things that I do, and I also choose to take the power, the value that comes from that. All right. So let's just jump in. So South Africa's goal as a BRICS country is to enhance its economic position and political cooperation with other emerging economies in the world. And that also plan to position themselves as powerhouses. And South Africa has that goal to position itself as the global gateway to the continent of Africa. This was one of the reasons why I chose to move to South Africa, because I recognize that Johannesburg specifically has, one, its own stock exchange. Two, the currency of the rand is one of the only globally traded currencies, African currencies. And while today the rand has hit in its trading capacity with the US dollar, probably its lowest low in the history, kind of dating back to even the numbers around, the COVID-19 pandemic. I understand why this is. As an analyst, as an economist, I understand why this is. And it is because South Africa, along with the other countries of the BRICS nation, are saying, we want to now position ourselves as global powerhouses, and everybody isn't happy about that. That's facts. So I have notes and I want to make sure that I cover them because while much of this is my own perspective, I really want to give people an understanding of why South Africa affords so much promise and why the things that are happening in South Africa are intentional and likely history repeating itself. Okay. So as a member of the BRICS system, South Africa seeks to promote its economic interests through increased trade, increased investment, and technology transfer. It also aims to leverage the collective strength of the group, the BRICS group, and promote international financial stability and reform global governance structures to better reflect the interest of developing countries. Okay. And so just to break that down a little bit, who has had the power for the last several centuries? The West. the dollar. It has been the most powerful instrument for trading, investment, technology management, defense, and geopolitically, developing countries have been unable to develop in the ways that they want to develop without getting the approval and the support of Western entities that exist somewhat in the G7, because it is not all just what we do as a nation. This has a lot to do with the global power structure, but who's at the head? Right? We know who's at the head. And for the developing nations that have an interest in developing and no longer being these third world countries as it pertains to the West, that have strong infrastructure, that have strong technology capabilities, that have strong talent, that have strong educational systems to foster growth in the world, they want next. And that's what BRICS is essentially doing. And everybody isn't pleased, right? And so with that, we are seeing today's decline of the rand. Today is May 12th. And so when this video is published, I think it will be published either the 13th or the 15th. That could have changed. But in addition to that, we're seeing record numbers around load shedding, right? So power is becoming a lot more unstable, access, and all of these things are connected, right? We've got the U.S. ambassador speaking on, potential conflicts between, South Africa and what is happening geopolitically. That I will link an article below for you to reference. But these things are all happening, and they're not happening in a vacuum. So for people that are in South Africa, for people that are wondering what's going on around the continent with South Africa has positioned itself as the first African country to say, we are going to take a stance against the global political structure that has dominated for the last few centuries. And we are also going to show up as a leadership that is willing to take that stance and provide additional access to other parts of the continent through that landscape. And I think it's a really strategic move. Is it gonna come without bumps in the road? No. But for someone like me that is really analytical, that enjoys data, that enjoys economic development, that essentially always wanted to be in a diplomatic space where I went in and supported growing economies, it's literally like a dream come true. And while there, yes, are things that are inconvenient that are happening here in South Africa, this country is so resilient. It has seen things that so many other developing countries have not seen and overcome, and are still operating in such this kind of this graceful posture that is essentially positioning them for what I see as the biggest breakthrough for one of the strongest countries here on the continent of Africa. So research is showing that South Africa sees its participation in BRICS as an opportunity to learn from the experiences of other emerging economies that are also included in this conglomerate. And I'm assuming they're learning definitely from India and China, as well as Brazil, while showcasing South Africa's own unique strengths and capabilities in the areas of mining, finance, renewable energy. I'd like to even add talent, Skillshare. There's a lot of different things that are happening here in South Africa that are not happening in other parts of the world or in these other countries that are a part of the BRICS conglomerate. And this is setting South Africa up as a strong leader for BRICS, essentially them hosting the 2023 BRICS Summit here this August, which I will be in attendance. So I'm really looking forward to that. So additionally, by South Africa aligning itself with these other countries, these other emerging economies, these other also very powerful developing nations, South Africa hopes to gain greater influence internationally within the decision-making process and to advance its own political and diplomatic interests. on a global stage. And so why is South Africa equipped for this? Why is Africa globally equipped for this? Because South Africa is the only South African country present in the original BRICS system. Now, many African countries have come on board and are in that vetting process of being vetted within the BRICS system, because there is a vetting process. There is a due diligence process that the BRICS system put other countries through. But I mean, so many countries are coming on board, and South Africa has shown how it's been able to gain its independence from really, really hard times, right? Hard times where geopolitically it was at one point seen as the most corrupt country in the world, based on the ICC. And it has overcome that. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But we see what it's going through to get to that place. And we all know before every breakthrough is a breakdown. And so is it going to be tomorrow that South Africa comes through this? Absolutely not. But to be in this position where they are essentially managing the relationship between the G7, the Western influence, and this new emerging economic powerhouse of BRICS, it's fascinating to watch. And I understand the challenge that leadership is having here, because we know what history has shown for African leaders that have taken such stance. We know, we're aware. And it doesn't come without conflict. It doesn't come without breakdown. And South Africa is experiencing that. But the upsides are so clear, right? The demographics. Africa is the most populated continent in the world and will be moving into the 22nd century with 1.5 billion, an average of 1.5 billion people living here today, expected to increase to 2 billion by 2050. The average age of an African is 19.7, so under 20. The average African is under 20 years old. And with that comes a huge workforce, an opportunity to train and develop people to be able to take on these new roles, these new jobs around mining, technology, infrastructure development, alternative energy, water. Huge resource, that fishing, the blue economy, agriculture. Did I already mention that? I mean, these are the things that are going to take our world into the next generation. And South Africa, at the helm of the leadership of the continent, is fully prepared to take us into that space, with the support of the other African nations, because we don't see Africa doing it in silos. That doesn't work anymore. So we're starting to see African countries come together regionally, and we're starting to see these groups form, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. And so South Africa is just making the boldest statement and saying, we're going to join with these emerging economies in Europe, in Asia, in South America, because this is where the largest population of people are coming from. This is where the next generation of producers are coming from. This is where the next generation of industrialization is coming from. It's no longer coming from the G7 countries. And, above and beyond that, we still get a great quality of life here in South Africa. The cost of living is affordable, even for the average South African. Food is still affordable. They can still have a decent meal and not be worried about running into grocery stores that are ransacked and look like there's been a mob coming through to take basic bread, milk and eggs. Like, those things are still affordable here. The values that exist around not just living, but not just existing and living to pay bills, but living to enjoy life exist here. And, the development is still very much happening. It is a thing. It is thriving and growing. Despite all of these, you see cranes in the sky. Companies are building commercial, residential spaces. These things are still happening. Hotels are being built. Major attractions are being built. And it's not stopping. and it's only going to grow from here. And I'm grateful to be here, to be on the ground, to see it, to be able to provide updates, and to really encourage people that have an interest in moving abroad, an interest in doing business, that South Africa is really a gateway to that. I also have business in other parts of the continent, but being based here in South Africa gives me so many advantages to taking my business to these other countries based on the influence and the infrastructure that exists here in South Africa. So I hope that was helpful. If you found it helpful, please be sure to like this content, share it with someone who would find value in it as well. And if you have an interest in building your business and investing in what is a growing economy that is growing, that is on the incline, because is your country on the incline? I mean, if you have an interest and getting on board with what's now and what's next, not what was, take a look at the Africa Investors Academy. Our community is growing. People are getting real value from that. We're able to have more in-depth conversations in the academy. I'm able to give really strong insights into the content and the information that I'm getting here through working at the center, through researching, and through, my relationships here on the ground. And so if you have an interest, we'd love to have you. Join via the link below, and I'll see you in our next meeting coming up in the next week. Until the next video, I'll see you soon.